Hey all, this is 012 Boku, and I'm coming at you with another review of you can't see it there, Fullmetal Alchemist, and it is the original, as you can see, and I thought it was going to be more epic than that, but yeah, Fullmetal Alchemist, and we are reviewing Episode 8, The Philosopher's Stone, which is a bit of a catalyst for this episode because the Elrics are learning about it for the first time, but it focuses more around Barry the Chopper because, sadly, as you can imagine, this episode starts out with the Elrics, or I should say Edward Elric, at least trying to revive Nina's dead body. He can't do it. You have the military, especially Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye, trying to reason over what he's doing. Riza looks at it at a point from human compassion, and Roy from the military perspective. And it isn't Riza Hawkeye who goes to talk to Edward; it's actually Roy Mustang. And Edward, doesn't want to let it go. He's rather upset by this. He's upset by what happened to Nina, who could kill Nina, who had the capacity to kill her, so on and so forth. Roy and even Alphonse wants him to let it go because Alphonse is worried. Alphonse is saddened about Nina too, clearly, but he knows his brother's taking this way too much to heart. You have Edward, who was put in charge of Shao Tucker's research because they want to continue it and learn what they can, the good ways of learning from it, but Edward's like, oh, this is monstrous, I don't want to do this, alchemists are monsters, be thou for the people, so on and so forth, in that way. But however, it isn't that type of truth. Edward is sulking as he's feeding, the chimera animals that Tucker made. Alphonse is going through some books, and he tells, Edward, that Shao Tucker was trying to review and find out about the Philosopher's Stone. Edward, doesn't want to hear about it. Alphonse is trying to encourage him, saying there must be some truth to it, because why would Tucker, even though Tucker was a monster, why would he be looking into the Philosopher's Stone? And, Edward runs off, tries to go in, well, he does go into the central offices where Roy Mustang is still currently at, and, he wants to look into the, this murder case of this person who's murdering women, because he thinks that this person may have killed Nina and did this to them. And as you can imagine, Roy's like, well, okay, you can do this, but you give me back your, pocket watch that enhances your alchemy, because you're not going to run off into an entirely new escapade and do this. Edward, agrees. He doesn't even think about it, just quickly gives up the watch, goes on looking for it. Meanwhile, Alphonse is actually asking Riza Hawkeye questions about the Philosopher's Stone. Riza cautions him about this and doesn't want him to pursue further in a hilarious way. I mean, not too over-the-top hilarious, but you have Fear Bradley, singing there behind him, doing like one of those things, like listening in. He actually says, oh, did I hear someone talk about the stone? And he actually, in a very not nice and unique way, tells Alphonse, that, hey, that, there's many people who've talked about it. Many of our people have searched for it. No one's come up with any loose ends. It's all been dead. But if anyone wants to find out anything that we've accrued from it over the years, they could find it in the central library, but only military state alchemists have access. And Alphonse gets the idea that Edward could look into it. Edward, meanwhile, is looking more into, the murder of the women, and apparently, Mace Hughes gave him the information. Hughes is sort of busting Edward's chops about how maybe an alchemist killed Nina, you don't know what you're looking for, and then Edward is, sort of giving him a tough time, and, Mace Hughes is showing all the other officers and, Edward the picture of his daughter, Nina, and, everybody's sort of busting his chops over it that he's shown them that picture 1,000 times. Sorry guys, need a little bit more water there, I can tell. But, let's see. Oh yes, and then the next part is, you have Winry Rockbell come out of nowhere to visit, the Alphonses, the Elrics, to congratulate him on his victory into getting into the school, or not to the school, the military, becoming a state alchemist. And, she's got all her stuff with her, the automail stuff, her tools. She's carrying a whole bunch of stuff. She's disappointed because she doesn't want to wait for Edward. Meanwhile, we have this woman show up at the compound of the cafeteria, giving out food and delivering it. And then you have this chef who's washing dishes telling this lady about, the murder that's on the loose, and tells him about Edward and how he can transmute just using his hands, which is a unique feat, and points Edward out to this lady. This lady, is thinking and, goes about her way. Meanwhile, you have Winry, see this truck that the lady drove where she carries her meat in. And that was another thing that Edward was discovering too, that the killer could be hiding, these murdered bodies in refrigerated trucks and then dumping them back on the street and whatnot. So he thinks that's a clue. And like I'm saying, Winry sees this refrigerated truck. She looks at it and she just wants to study it and take it apart. And you have the lady come up behind Winry and they're talking, getting to know each other, and then all of a sudden the lady's like, would you like to take a look inside? And, Winry's like, oh, can I really? And then, in Japanese, you have Winry basically say, why are you staring at me for? And then, she mentions, would you like to look inside? And even with that, in English and Japanese, the lady gives this one weird look, so you're starting to put the pieces together that this lady may not be normal. Edward discovers Winry, isn't outside waiting for him like he was told by one of the officers. He notices there's a tire track, and, he asks the officer who's there. The officer said the refrigerated truck's there. Edward quickly puts two and two together that Winry possibly could have just been kidnapped by the killer. He finds the refrigerated truck. He sees the lady there and says, was there anyone else with you? And then, she says, there was someone else over there, a young girl. And, Edward's all happy saying, hey, I'll grab the other person or the girl. We'll get out of here. Then he's, I'm going to say, smacked with this large object, or I'm going to say it was a bundle of meat, because everybody knows, the meat is very heavy and thick and can pack quite a punch. That's why, if you guys remember Rocky Balboa messes up his hands on the huge ribs, because those things are tough. And she hits Edward in the back of the neck, and this causes Edward to lose consciousness, and then, he wakes up where he's tied up, he's missing his automail arm, and the woman introduces herself as Barry the Chopper, the killer who's been killing all these women. He, reveals to Edward that he kidnapped Winry. Winry's all tied up and gagged as well. He says, I'm going to take her apart, and you can watch as I do it, and, I'll enjoy it. And then, Edward wants to get into the side of why Barry does this, and Barry just says, well, because people can. Nobody's ever asked me. I just killed my wife because she was nagging me about something, and I just wanted to see what she was made of, and that's why I kept doing this, to see what people are made of, to their basic building blocks. So a complete sick individual, and it was just done very well. And Barry mentions to Edward again that alchemists can do terrible things, that he saw alchemists killing random people in a village. Edward still doesn't want to believe that alchemists are capable of such an atrocity. He uses, he found one of Winry's bullets outside of the refrigerated truck. He basically uses his one tied up hand that's behind his back to basically make the alchemic symbol, turns the chain into a pull, and then, Barry tried, and he was already injured. Barry sticks the meat cleaver into his shoulder, and he already injured Edward from before. Edward, tries to take the pull, fight back. He blocks Barry with his automail foot and, escapes that way. Tries to free Winry but can't, but, Barry's on his heels, and Barry's just psychotically hacking away, chopping away. Edward is actually literally the most scared he's ever been in his life, thinking he's going to die by this crazed mass murderer. And, right before that, he, gets caught in the thing, and then I think, you have Barry who Barry gets knocked down because Winry's struggling. She falls into a line of meat, and the line of meat hits Barry. Barry gets knocked down. He's about to chop Edward, but Edward uses his automail hand to block it away, and he's about to stab Barry in a blind rage because he's that fearful. Alphonse stop him, and then Edward swipes at Alphonse's chest, thinking It'll take more than that to kill me, brother. Meaning, that probably hurt Alphonse in a way, but he knew that Edward didn't mean to do it. The military shows up, frees Winry and Edward. They're saved, You have Winry with Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye looking sad for what happened to Edward. You have Alphonse tell Edward about the Philosopher's Stone. Edward realizes a truth that, alchemists aren't invincible, realizing that, he very well could have died here, and that the whole thing just sort of spooked him. So he, realized that, that they have to take care of each other, or else they could easily be killed. And, it leads to that sort of straight up forward thinking for him, and even for Alphonse. And Alphonse wants to find the Philosopher's Stone to get his body back, to feel the terror that Edward felt, so he could feel these emotions and not just express them. And, this leads to the next day, to where, Edward takes back his watch, rejoins the State Alchemists, and eventually, tells Roy Mustang, I will do whatever you want me to, but if you allow me to look for the Philosopher's Stone, do whatever you need me to do. Roy says, well, okay, I'll allow you to do that, but I want all the updates that you also find in the Philosopher's Stone, or else I may leak something about you and your brother and your human transmutation to the higher-ups, and then you and your brother will become test subjects under the military's watchful eye. And to that setup, too, I forgot there was another earlier part that after Edward had quit, he ran into Scar again, and Scar asked him, are you a State Alchemist too? Edward said no. Scar said you're better off, and then at the end he noticed some Winry and Alphonse are together. They're talking about how Barry didn't kill, what's her name? Oh, Nina, and they're wondering who could have done it. And, what's her name? Winry's telling Edward, you're going to buy me all these things. And Winry and Edward are actually quite sad, given the ordeal they just both went through, almost getting killed by the killer. And they're both, I believe they're both thinking of everything and everybody, wondering that, that this line of work they're all in is dangerous. And Winry's worried about her friends, and, Edward's just worried about everybody in general too. And, Scar's watching him from the alleyway. He notices that Edward has his pocket watch back and realizes that Edward is back on the list as a State Alchemist and a potential threat to him. So that's how that whole episode goes. Really quickly, with the characters, everybody was really good in this. I especially have to give it to 3 people, and the 3 people I give it to are Edward, Vic Mignogna, Romy Paku, Alphonse, Eridismuk, Rie Kugamiya. And, what they go through and what they talk about in both Japanese and English are really good. Harrowing, you feel for the brothers and what they have. And, Edward's fear while almost being killed by Barry the Chopper was both good in Japanese. Better in English, I think, but good in Japanese too. Romy Paku also conveyed that very well as Vic Mignogna. But Barry, played by Jerry Jewell and Kentaro Ito. Now, nothing with Kentaro Ito. Kentaro Ito was good, and I liked how they did his voice and how he sounded like he was coming from far away, catching up, and his little soft chuckles were amusing and creepily amusing. This guy was still nutty, but man, Jerry Jewell. You want a psychopath that was played. That was definitely Jerry Jewell to a T. He played that so well in this episode. Creepy, vindictive guy. Loved it all the way through. And overall, a great episode. I love how, again, Edward, in a way, you could say, I know he's not a damsel in distress, but he was a guy in distress. I love how, again, he ends up in trouble in this one. His fear was palpable. And again, it was really an eye-opener for him to know that I may act all tough and good, but these situations, if I ever get caught or captured or in these situations I can't get out of, I could be in trouble regardless of how good my alchemy is. And I just love that for the overall episode. And I love how Alphonse kept doing his digging and he found out more about the Philosopher's Stone. So this really grows the episode going forward. And, again, what do you guys think? Do you like what this episode represents? Have you seen any of the original showing at all? Just let me know in the comments down below, and I will talk to you guys again. This is 012 Boku, and I will see you. All right.